My name is Patrick Breen. I'm a pre-service teacher at Memorial University. I'm here today with Dr. Thomas Kennedy as part of our Interview an Expert series, where we interview professionals in the field of technology education. Dr. Thomas Kennedy graduated from Memorial University in 2006 with a Bachelor of Arts in French Studies. He then went on to receive a second undergraduate degree in education at Memorial University with a diploma in technology education. Dr. Kennedy then pursued education further with a Master of Arts and Education in Francophone Literature and Culture, and finally a Doctorate of Education in Learning Sciences. Dr. Kennedy has worked consistently as an intermediate secondary teacher, all while pursuing higher education, and has since published many articles on topics such as remote delivery of learning during the COVID-19 pandemic, identity development in technology education, and the navigation between technical knowledge and application. Today, we will be interviewing Dr. Kennedy with a focus on a chapter he wrote in the Bloomsbury Handbook of Technology Education named Curricular and Non-Curricular Perspectives. Dr. Kennedy, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Right on. So the first question I have for you, just based on your background a little bit, is what sparked your interest in technology education, and how important is technology education to a student's general development?
Well, I have to say that, and this might age me a bit, my initial interest in technology education, I think, came from the fact that my early teens, I grew up during the integration of the internet into schools. I have fond memories of working on my family's 486. So I think from an early age, I had an appreciation for technology. And of course, seeing during my early years, during junior high and senior high, seeing how technology kind of changed the landscape in a lot of classes, I think that kind of set the foundation for, my perspective as I got older. So in terms of technology education, so my interest came from, say, those early experiences, but also seeing the value in technologies as I was completing my undergrad at Memorial. So my first couple of years, I started doing computer science. So that connection with technology in my own, say, chosen curricular path was important. So I think I've valued that throughout my own life. And because I saw value in my own experiences, I see it as a necessary piece to, a student's education in today's curriculum. So fortunately, we do have the Tech Ed curriculum, which kind of complements the theoretical side. So we often see, a lot of programming done through science curriculum, a lot of theoretical work, some select lab work. But what technology education kind of offers, it offers to fill in the gaps that we see in a lot of our curriculum. So it gives students oftentimes, we'll say, the opportunity to do the experiential learning, the hands-on work, and really develop those skills that, are a bit different from, say, traditional education.
That's interesting. How do you think that nowadays with students are coming into school with a lot of technology exposure, like most of them have smartphones in their pockets, how do you think that changes their perspective coming right into it?
Well, I think one of the issues we actually see with this in today's education, today's classroom, is the fact that so we've gone through kind of a timeline, if you will, of the early adopters, those who grew up with the technology as it was coming on stream and being mainstreamed, and had, say, a more of an understanding for the internal function. Maybe like I remember back, as I said before, to my early years, you knew the internal parts to a computer. It was kind of a part of what you learned because they were new pieces of technology. But like you mentioned, students that are now coming into classrooms, they might have access to smart technologies, their cell phones, their iPads, cutting edge technology. But we're seeing some gaps in their knowledge base in terms of how they work beyond their uses for social media and similar functions. The assumption that students are coming in able to type, for example, they're not. They can text and they're able to work their smart technologies, their smartphone and whatnot. But we find that there's still that gap between, their technology for constructive means, we'll say in more of a, curricular way or professional way.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. And that actually, it kind of ties into our next question. Because in the article, you talk a lot about technological identity. So we were wondering, with regards to developing a healthy technological identity, what are some teaching techniques or considerations that you've employed over your career that leads to a positive relationship with technology in the classroom?
Right. So I find, I think first and foremost, as we talk about technological identity or identity within any technical realm, it's all about the idea of comfort, right? So it's all about fostering a sense of comfort and belonging within those areas that are often unfamiliar. So when we talk about identity, so it's first and foremost important to highlight what we're talking about. And second, there's kind of two strategies that I've adopted over the years. One is a strategy whereby we use, say, industry level tools, so that can kind of go from as simple as a carpenter's pencil to the technical Mastercam software you'd use for computer-aided design. So in using these tools, I found over nearly 17 years in the classroom that students kind of they envision themselves easier as say technical workers when they're using actual tools from the trade. You might see yourself when you're engaging in a shop environment. The second you use your hammers and your measuring tape, even your basic hand tools, you get more of a feeling for that carpenter's work. So in my own teaching, the literature will refer to these as pivotal objects, objects you can kind of use and then kind of engage as say that other identity. So again, the simplest kind of explanation is, the carpenter's pencil, as you work as a carpenter, kind of helps you reimagine yourself. So the first piece, of course, is that use of those pivotal objects, those meaningful tools. The second piece is of course, creating that safe environment. So safe in the sense that, students are fully aware that within, say, my classroom, they can engage with their peers, they can work collaboratively without any risk of judgment or fear of failure. Right. So setting kind of that positive culture within your classroom, I've always found is key for creating that identity. And that goes from, traditional technology education, curricular classrooms, to your extracurricular activities such as robotics teams, which I mentored for years. So again, just kind of coming back to the idea that as we create that identity, right, that positive sense of self in a technical capacity, it's important that they engage properly with the technical work, and of course that they feel safe in doing so.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess it kind of makes me think of like other subject areas where, for example, if you have a teacher with a really high level of knowledge and there's a knowledge gap there and they're having trouble transferring that info, if they're too hard on a student for not getting like the basic concepts, that can kind of like scare them away from that class. And especially with technology, with like the physical aspect, like you said, like getting
Yeah,
comfortable
and
with a hammer.
Patrick, even if you think back to your early years, completing a science lab, the second you put on that lab coat, you had a better feeling of your sense of belonging in that space, right? You put on your visor, goggles, and your coat, and you get your kit to do your lab. It's those feelings that those objects bring that that's half of it sometimes.
Right, right. Just to put you in that mindset of, I'm supposed to be here and like
Right,
I'm acting as a carpenter now. And then eventually maybe being a carpenter.
right.
All right, our next question is kind of interesting. Again, sort of relating to technological identity. During adolescence, peer groups become a major factor in the development of one's identity. How important is this when deciding like how to form groups for class projects and introducing people to technology?
So that's, group work is a tricky kind of beast in education. So there's a bit of an issue there. So on one side, I'm a firm believer that everybody within say a project should have the opportunity to do all aspects of the work. Some downsides I've seen in the past, and I'm thinking back even to my own experiences within the technology education program, was doing group work where you delegate the activity and one person assumes the role of maybe designer for the poster, maybe you're programming for your prototype, and in doing that I find sometimes people don't experience or group members don't experience the task the same way. And that's something I'm always aware of when doing group work with students. So basically, when doing or assigning groups, it's you always need to be aware of the fixed roles, the reoccurring role where Patrick, someone like yourself, may be always the group leader as you do your various work throughout the year, and you'll find you never shift from the role because you're well suited for it. And in doing so, maybe you don't get the exposure to do the design piece or the fabrication piece, the program, right? So it's kind of an area that you really need to be careful in that group work. So first and foremost, as I'm saying, I'm aware of the downside, for example, of group work and people not necessarily getting exposure to all aspects of the activity. But the second piece, of course, is kind of when we do group work, that we focus on the strengths of certain individuals. And as we kind of distribute them amongst the groups, we're ensuring that we have, good representation, different backgrounds, different areas of interest. The idea there, of course, is that through a diverse group, you get different perspectives, and then you can generate a more potentially meaningful product. So I have to admit, I see the value in group work. I really do. The social constructivism piece, the generating the knowledge, I do value it, but I also value too students having the opportunity to do the full workflow themselves. So I tend to go back and forth throughout the year, giving opportunity for both group work and individual work.
Okay, that's interesting. And if you were to take the same question sort of applied to like a non-curricular setting, how much do you sort of facilitate, or do you just let students fall into their natural roles where they feel comfortable? Or
Well, see, that's a hard one because it's all about the dynamic nature of the group you're working with, right? The larger group. So it's always hard to allow them to say, like you said, just naturally fall into their working groups because oftentimes, you don't have that distribution of skill sets. So you'll get one group that might excel, one group that struggles. You might get one group that's proficient at designing their media package, while the other group is not good with manufacturing product, right? So when they kind of gravitate together and form their own groups, there's the potential for large deficiencies within their abilities.
okay, interesting. I really like the part, on to our next question. I really like the part in your article where you sort of discuss boundary objects and integrating that into the curriculum. I think that's pretty interesting, especially giving students something that they can take on to their next chapter of their life. And our next question is there a way where boundary objects could help improve the credibility of technology education teachers in the province? And what could be the challenges to implementing this?
I think this goes back to I did a presentation for TESIC, so the Technology Education Special Interest Council within the province, probably about 10 years ago, where I discussed the value of the open badge framework. So that was the idea that you would submit skills and then you would be rewarded a badge, much the same as like the scouting movement does, or your swim lessons with Red Cross, or what used to be with Red Cross. Uh, I've always liked the idea of having that micro credential, that little reward showing your skill set. So again, the issue there is it has to go uh, beyond my interest. It has to go beyond our interest. There has to be a governing body that will accept the credentials, accept the endorsements, and I think this is kind of where we kind of miss the train on open badges. So I've noticed now that I believe the district within the province. I'm not sure how official it is, but I know they've started assigning badges to initiatives that teachers undertake. So whether they are professional learning community badges or similar, but I see potential there. The potential is there to recognize teachers who will upskill as they go into their careers. So you need to understand too the idea that I myself, completed the technology education program before the computer science course was being offered, before the robotics course, like these high school curricular courses, where I didn't have the university-based credential, but maybe through a badging system, you could create the opportunity to gain those skills as teachers in like a badge type boundary object, but the employer would have to recognize that as a legitimate credential, and that's kind of the issue. And like you mentioned, Patrick, in your question and your lead in, students having the ability to work towards a goal and be rewarded with a credential that's beyond the course credit, something a little more meaningful. Maybe it's your intro to Python programming, maybe it's your Scratch expert badge. The idea of having those boundary objects that can be, an additional certification you can take with you. I think this is where the new standard-based kind of system could align well with a boundary object type system. But again, it needs to be adopted above the classroom, above the school level, even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's something to keep in mind, I guess, for us new teachers going forward, because a lot of changes, I guess, need to happen to implement something like that. But yeah, it makes me think of like student motivation for like projects. Like ideally, you want students to really take pride in their work, and so when you link that with like an official, certification, something beyond just high school or junior high, I think that's a really good way to get students really interested in their work.
Right. And Patrick, the other piece of that too, like I know your background at the Royal Military College, and no doubt you and your peers valued certain badges, right? The
Mm-hmm.
reward of a badge for something accomplished, right? There's a lot of this historical value to the idea of badges as representation, right? So like there is potential there. There's a lot to do to get it off the ground, but it could be a positive system, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, our next question. We touched a bit earlier on non-curricular settings, and we talked a bit about group work there, but we were wondering more generally, how might you change your teaching methods when facilitating a makerspace in your school when compared to teaching general technology courses?
So, so that's kind of the foundation of what the chapter was about. And not just say maker spaces, we'll say just maker programs in general. Those programs that exist outside of the curriculum and outside of the classroom. The big piece that I've found through my experiences, as well as research, is that there's a lack of consistency. So the big issue will be, from one school to the next, even within a school, you can have programs that have the same goal or same scope document directing them, but the actual experiences within the programs are very different. Personally, even when I run an activity that's outside of the curriculum, a makerspace, a robotics group, a coding club, there's still structure. So what seems like a very unstructured kind of activity or environment actually takes a lot of planning. And sometimes that's a kind of an oversight for many. When they run their programs, they assume it's uh, it's independent work. It's to say personally motivated. So some think that the maker movement is all about, I can't tell you what your project should look like. It should really come from your internal desire to generate an artifact. While I value that perspective and appreciate it, there is a piece that's required in terms of structuring the activity. So, of course, within the formalized shop environment, my fabrication lab, it is a structured place. Oftentimes, it's prescribed projects where we work through them together to build skills. But I do encourage that the idea of playing around with various designs. There is a piece there where you can generate solutions, work with one, and move forward. And that's why you'll find a lot of the Newfoundland curriculum for tech ed is built upon the engineering design process. So then I do that curricularly. So then, of course, I take that same kind of structure, that workflow, and I apply that when I do out of school activities like your maker spaces and whatnot. Because you find that it's through that little bit of structure, that workflow will say, that students are able to see positive results in their artifacts, being able to start something, knowing where to start and where to progress and move forward and generate something that they can appreciate. So you'll find that even in unstructured activity, I do like to go back to, say, the design process, to some type of workflow that will work for them. Especially as within out of school context, the students are coming and going a lot different than your curricular classroom, right? So you have to have them, with a structure in place, they're able to jump in, leave, jump back in, and re-engage in the activity. But without that, say, that workflow or that timeline, that structured approach, they might have an issue in doing that. So it really pushes them out as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely recall experiences in high school with similar maker spaces where we were given almost too much freedom. And we sort of, if you lack that foundational knowledge, you kind of don't know where to go when you get into that setting. And that can be harming, like you said, to technological identity.
Yeah. And it's rough too, because it goes back to technological knowledge as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the idea that, what processes you can use and what they kind of create. You have to know what materials do and which ones are best for certain activities or artifacts. And you have to have the skill set to use the tools themselves. So, it's not as easy, like you said, to go in and have an open space where there's tools available if you don't know how to use the tools, if you don't know what wood to use, what plastics to print with. It's not a free for all. There has to be some structure, and like you said, to support that play, right? That sense of tinkering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually staying on that topic of sort of getting familiar with different tools, materials, and processes, our next question is, how do you incorporate play into a curricular setting while still defining a rubric and producing a fair final grade for each student?
Right. So I think that's a it's a bit of a misnomer when we talk about play. Like it's not an unstructured sense of enjoyment, right? It's not about fulfilling your sense or your desire, for fun. Play is all about playing with your ideas. You know, juggling things around your head, working with prototypes, reimagining solutions. Play is about working through that, in a fulfilling way. So, of course, as you are aware, the design process allows for, the idea of gaining that foundational knowledge, generating solutions, choosing one to prototype and moving forward with. So, like, your sense of play is integrated into that process. So I find that you're allowed to tinker, but the idea within your curriculum is that you're still scoped, in the sense you're still working towards a certain project. So oftentimes I think of it in terms of, we're all taking the same hallway down. The room is our end goal, right? But there is space within the hallway for you to enter at low points, high points, really work within the boundaries, right? Flex those walls. But the idea is that you're still working towards, a product in the end. So in terms of evaluation, you did mention the idea of rubrics. So rubrics kind of come and go in terms of popularity and legitimacy, we'll say. Um, but the issue I have with rubrics is generally I design them so they're based on tracking the workflow that students engage within, making sure they're doing all the pieces of the puzzle before they create and as they reflect on the artifact they generate, they're reflecting on how to make it better or what they would change. The artifact itself, you'll find generally is not within a rubric, so it's not evaluated in the same sense that you might think. I'm not worried about a student who generates a three-dimensional design for 3D printing. The actual artifact, if the all the faces, if they're not perfect, the corners aren't perfect. What's more important? What are we teaching? Is it the creation of that artifact their first time around, or is it about engaging in that workflow and evaluating them based on process? So you'll find that there's a lot of kind of debate. There's a lot of discussion about that sense of what is a fair mark in technical activity. And I would venture to say that the majority of what your evaluation is based on process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that kind of makes sense what you were mentioning about the sort of the finer details sometimes with making projects. For example, like in skilled trades, if it's a student's first time doing a project and it doesn't come out the way a professional would do it, you don't want to bang them up too much because it might discourage them from engaging in the course.
Right. And you'll find the outcomes too. The outcomes are never that specific, right? So for example, if you have two students, and if you want to go, so we'll go skilled trades. So two students are doing drywalling. One is doing it for the first time. One has done it before and has experience. Drywalling, like yourself, is something that comes with time, with just experience, and it's hateful. But anyways, but based on a rubric, are they being evaluated the same way? If student A, who has never done it before, still follows all the processes, but doesn't have quite the same finish as that student who's experienced, how does that sit within an evaluation? That in my perspective, that's not a 95 student who's experienced and a 70 student, because the evaluation is based on process, their knowledge of the subject matter, and not just that final tangible artifact. So yeah, and like you said, in skilled trades, exactly. That's another great example of where that could apply.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll finish up with our questions here, and we've got one final question that actually comes from our the other students in our tech class that they wanted to ask you. So our last question is, how has technology education grown in Newfoundland and Labrador since you were a student? And what obstacles does technology education face in our province in the future?
Oh, so in terms of my own experience, so I graduated high school in 2002. My school didn't have a shop-based program, so we had some technology courses. I think like the old integrated systems course, maybe something like that, but no designated shop. So not, I'm not just talking skilled trades and residential construction. I'm talking about even the old shop-based courses, the cutting board courses. There was none of that when I graduated. As I went through, I think skilled trades came into the province around 2008. So it was kind of new when I went through the tech ed program. I really saw the difference between my high school experience and doing the program in 2008 and seeing that now all of a sudden there were courses that would allow students to experience the various skill trades, for examples, which for years was a streamed route for those who weren't academic. So I know my high school experience was such that I was academic. I did fairly well in high school. So therefore, my trajectory was going the post-secondary university route. And then the absence of skilled trades in the curriculum at that time, was indifferent because it was just those people would naturally go that route anyways. In hindsight, like a horrible perspective, we've since evolved, and now we offer, in high schools, the opportunity or the exposure to experience both, the academic traditional university route, as well as, your skill trades route, your technical routes. And those go from courses like skill trades and residential construction, design and fabrication, and that feeds kind of into engineering education. So I think the perspective has broadened in schools, allowing for that opportunity. Now, the downside in terms of school-based scheduling, oftentimes you'll see that these technology education courses are actually offered and paired against your pure sciences. So, an academic student might have to choose between physics education and their skilled trades class. Depending on their roots, they might not get the exposure, if they're already set on, say, a university route versus a trades route, or a college route, then they kind of lack that exposure to something new, to that, do-it-yourself type movement, which is unfortunate because it creates a balanced student. So I've seen growth. I've seen, especially from my high school experience to the course offerings now, and the exposure that students can get. That hurdle, that scheduling hurdle is still an issue. And of course, in larger districts like our own, I think NL Schools is in, within Newfoundland, is 205 schools maybe. So then we're running into issues with access to technology, access to licensing. Um, one of the things I've seen lately too is that as free versions are becoming more common online, web-based tools, I fear that decision makers might move away from the paid product, which is more reflective of industry. So again, going back to my earlier comment about, those pivots, it's a bit different when I'm using, say, an online tool like Easel, which is a good beginner tool to get, interested in CNC machining or routing. But then to lose or move away from Mastercam, which is an industry standard tool, for the free tool, you do lose that kind of that exposure to the real world tools. Um, so I think when I reflect on the obstacles that might come up in the future, I have concerns about what it will come to in terms of when less expensive options are available, and maintaining a high standard, in the technical work that we offer students. And of course, it's just reality as well. You always have to factor in the cost. But I think now, as our technology education program at Memorial University, and I say our just because I'm an instructor within the program, um, I've seen over the last decade or so that we've shifted the programming so that it does reflect schools that are actually within the high school curriculum and the junior high curriculum. So the alignment there, I find there are more qualified technology education teachers coming through and graduating. So I see that as a strength within the system. So when these obstacles do come up moving forward, I feel that the qualified pre-service teachers that are coming through the program now will be able to offer a perspective, but also run with sweeping changes that might come from the system.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It takes a lot of foundational knowledge, I guess, to be able to be a technology education teacher and then go on and teach that to other students.
Right,
But
and you'll find with a solid background and then some experience, then you're able to adapt to those changes, because the changes are inevitable within our area. So,
right,
yeah,
yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Kennedy, thank you for your time. We'll wrap it up here. For the folks at home, if you haven't read Dr. Kennedy's article in the Handbook of Technology Education. I recommend giving it a read. And yeah, thank you for your insights today and the sort of review of your article.
Thank you.
All right, cheers.